Awesome. Okay, cool. So welcome. My name's Holly. I am the family room WA, and I'm here today with Cath, who is Soulful Birth. Cath is a private midwife, and she has very gratefully for me let us have a little deep dive and look at private midwives today. So I'm really excited. I've worked with a lot of midwives who ended up going on to start their own business and become private midwives, but I'm really looking forward to a little peek behind the scenes. So I am Holly. I am a nurse and a midwife. I am originally from Perth, and I've also worked for rural and metro WA. I did do a little bit of stint in Queensland as well. I am now working back in Perth, which is quite different from my country, kind of a life that I have as a midwife, which is also where I met Cath, who's up in Geraldton, and I worked there for, I think, about 6 months. I see lots and lots of parents struggling with the massive transition that comes with having a baby, whether it's their first baby or they've had lots of babies before. And so I set up the family room to support this time of life. I did some extra training. I'm now a qualified therapist and a neurologist programming practitioner. So I think all about mindset, birth trauma, life trauma, kind of removing and resolving all those fears and that trauma and how it impacts your life. And I'm doing the things that get in the way of achieving what you want out of life. So I really recognised at the start of this year that I kind of thought the health system, I mean, I know it's complicated, but I thought, you know, like people know their options when it comes to birth. And after a few conversations, realised that actually, no, I'm just so deep in the birth world, it seems quite obvious to me, but it's not actually obvious to the general population. So I'm slowly working my way through all the different types of birth workers. So this month we get to have a really good look at private midwives. So this is Cath.
Hi.
So Cath started her midwifery in Melbourne, and that's also where I believe she had her own 2 babies. And then she's since moved to Geraldton in Western Australia. She's a mum, she's a midwife, and she's also a home birther. She's super passionate about parents having their own amazingly positive experience when it comes to pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. Not only does she offer one-on-one tailored midwifery care, she also offers home birth, hospital birth, and other holistic services such as motherhood blessings, postpartum healing sessions, placenta encapsulation, and more. So welcome, Cath.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So first, what is a private midwife? A privately practicing midwife, or a PPM, as I'm calling it today, is a registered and endorsed midwife who's gone into private practice. They can do all their care as home visits from their house, from the clinic setting, from their clients' houses as well. They can work solo in a group with a buddy midwife. Some private midwives offer full spectrum care, including birth, but some just prefer to focus on specific parts of that and kind of become a bit specialised. Private midwives are experts in normal pregnancy and birth, and this is ideal if you're healthy and you're wanting a normal birth. How does someone become a private midwife? So there's no actual course that says this is how you become a private midwife, which would make life a little bit easier for a lot of us, I think. But private midwives are registered midwives who have already worked for a couple of years, who go on to do additional studies. So the big one of this, these extra study courses is a prescribing course. That's in order to be given a provider number and a prescriber number as per Medicare, the PBS and ARPA, which is the Australian Health Practitioner Registration or Regulation Agency, to have successful applications to ARPA and to Medicare to get a prescriber number and be an endorsed midwife. You have to have over 5,000 hours of midwifery practice in the last 6 years. So you do have to be quite, like you have to be working at least part-time for that 6 years or full-time for about 3 years in order to be recognised as an endorsed midwife by AHPRA. Once you have received your AHPRA recognition and your Medicare numbers, it means that a private midwife can order scans, blood tests and prescribe medications that are needed through the pregnancy, birth and the postpartum period. The medication prescription can be slightly different state to state. Here in WA, we are able to prescribe more medications than someone in New South Wales, Victoria are, but every state has their own regulations around that. Being a private midwife means someone's decided to go into this work because it's a passion, but also using it as their own business. So they must have registered this decision with AHPRA, and there's a lot of ethics and requirements around behaviour and around working that they need to follow. Okay, what are the benefits of having a private midwife? So a private midwife is considered a continuity of care model, which is where the person providing the care is named as your lead provider and is giving the majority of your care. Continuity of care has some amazing benefits: building a relationship, not having to explain your history to multiple people. It's amazing. Advocating for you. The private midwife is also generally considered to be on call for you and can answer your pregnancy concerns 24/7. Of course, they are going to have days off, sick days, holidays, but this is where often working, maybe not in a formal agreement with another private midwife or buddy midwife system comes in, but there's usually someone that clients will be referred to if the private midwife is away. Is that how you would generally work out?
Yeah, that's exactly how we work. Yep. So I have a buddy midwife, thankfully, who steps in if I'm at a birth or, as you said, unwell, or even just having a few drinks or going out to a party or something.
Yeah, perfect. Because we've all got to let our hair down, right?
Absolutely.
You can't just be like attached to your bone 24/7.
Yeah.
Private midwives tend to have more flexibility built into their schedule, and it's usually more convenient and more comfortable for you. And most of the home visits, most of the checkups for private midwives are usually all at your own house, so you don't have to think about how where to drive, how to get parking, factoring in those extra considerations. Makes life a little bit easier.
Holly, can I chime in there? That's actually one of my favourite aspects of private practice, that we get invited into the family's home. And so we know their pets, we know their toddlers, we often know other family members like grandparents or aunts or uncles. And so it really becomes a family experience. And when I was talking to you earlier, I talked about being a guest in her home, and that's it's a really different power dynamic than when you go into a clinic. It's definitely one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. It's a different power dynamic, because I feel like even for people that are very, very well researched and well read and know the kind of birth that they want, as soon as that person steps into like a clinic office or a hospital waiting room or something, like a lot of us, even for myself, just going to the doctor, I'll just forget all my questions because I'm not in my own environment. I'm in an environment that I would consider belonging to that health professional. So I think it is really like a very good note to talk about power dynamics and how different that can be as well.
I also love to see how she lives too. So do they have lots of house plants? Do they make their own bread? Do they eat together as a family? Like all of that also adds to the relationship and the type of care I provide as well.
Yeah, you get to really know someone and like really tailor that care to how they live, and not just for the 20 minutes that you see them in a clinic once a month. All right, so now I haven't referenced this, but this is all reasonably recent research within the last 3 to 5 years that people who use a private midwife intending to birth with them as their lead carer are less likely to use painkillers or anesthesia. So that's when it's talking about like epidurals and spinals. Less likely to have an instrumental birth, so less likely to have a vacuum or forceps delivery. Less likely to have a cesarean section. That one's quite significant. It drops, I think, about 15 to 20%. And the Australian average at the moment is a cesarean section rate of about 36%. So you're looking at a really significant decrease in cesarean section rate. And that's not even considering people birthing at home versus in hospital. It's like all environments for birth, just like your lead carer is a private midwife. People with a private midwife are more likely to go into labour by themselves. They're less likely to have their waters broken for them, which is actually a really good thing. It really helps your baby figure out what position they need to be in. Sometimes if your waters are broken for you, baby's option of movement and using the waters for repositioning is kind of removed from them. You're much less likely to have an episiotomy, which is, I'm sure every woman is happy to hear. You're less likely to experience intervention. Of course, midwives can recognise when birth is not going the way that it could be, and will intervene as medically necessary. But all the unnecessary interventions, the routine, just because, oh, this is just how we normally do it, that isn't included, thankfully. Much more likely to be satisfied with their care and their outcomes, regardless of outcome. Much more likely to have a positive experience of labour and birth, and also costs the health system significantly less. Which, I mean, even one of those reasons is a great reason. But when you put them all together, it's just a fantastic level of care. Is there anything that you would add to that, Cath?
I think, less likely to have an episiotomy, but less likely to also have a significant tear that requires suturing and a recovery period, and less likely to have a large bleed. So you just have healthier, intact women that go through midwifery care, private midwifery care.
How good is that?
And breastfeeding too. I thought I should add to breastfeeding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Are there any disadvantages? There is nothing that you lose out on when you choose a private midwifery model, as long as you're choosing a midwife who suits you and aligns with what you're wanting out of your journey to parenthood. Private midwives aren't surgically trained. They can't do things like cesarean sections or vacuums or forceps. Not that they're needed anywhere near as much when you're in that model anyway. Some private midwives will have what's called admitted rights, where they can actually be the person that's your primary carer when you're in hospital, and the hospital recognises that. Whereas some hospitals don't recognise all private midwives with admitting rights, in which case you can then be considered a support person, but you can't be like discussing like the medical decisions and seem to be making medical decisions or with that person. But in saying that, if you're with a private midwife, most people have done a really good amount of research and know what type of birth they want, and then just having the extra kind of voice and the extra support is really an amazing aspect of that. How do you find a private midwife? So there are lots of ways. You can search online, you can search on socials, and you can ask your healthcare providers. Most of us in Australia, when we suspect we're pregnant or we've done a positive home pregnancy test, our first port of call is often just our GP. Just be aware that not a lot of GPs know who their local private midwives are. So when you say, oh, I want a home birth, or I want you know, I'm my own private midwife to birth at this hospital. For one, like they're medical professionals who have not been trained in birth. And so they're not going to be aware of like the multitude of options. They're often just going to ask if you've got private health insurance or if you're planning to go public. That's the number one question that most people get. But you know, you might also have a GP that's got a wonderful relationship with the birthing community, and they might be able to point you in the right direction. So just be aware that they might know a great deal about the community, and they also might not. If you're in Western Australia, there's a great list, and it's frequently updated. It's on the Vicky Pulse website, and I'm sure there'll be lists in other states and maybe Facebook if you can't find it on Facebook. Where else can you find it? Now, lots of people presume that you need someone to refer you to a private midwife, but this is actually untrue. You can refer yourself, which is really, really cool. You don't even need to have seen a GP yet to confirm your pregnancy, although it can be quite helpful sometimes. But if you've done your own pregnancy test at home and it's come back positive and you know which private midwife you're wanting for your pregnancy, that's when you contact them. And being that private midwives have their own Medicare numbers and things, they can order all your bloods, they can order that early dating scan if you need it. You don't actually have to get into a GP and then like get a referral sent. You can kind of be quite independent in that, which is, it's nice to take some independence and some ownership over some of the things that we get to do in the health system. Cath, would you say that the majority of your people like just see you straight away as soon as they know that they're pregnant, or do they go through their GP first? What do they do?
I do have a mix, but generally with private midwives, you need to get in really early because we book out. There's only about 200 of us. No, that's not true. There's less than that. I'll have to get back to you on that, sorry. There's not a lot of us in Australia, so we do book out, and yeah, we're usually having women contact us between 6 and 8 weeks to say that they're pregnant and they'd like some care. Yeah,
and I guess if you've waited, you know, to 3 or 4 weeks pregnancy to see a GP, and then they want to wait for your scans to come, or your bloods to come back and maybe get a scan before they do a referral, that might be too late.
Yeah, it actually makes it trickier for me because then I have to chase up results too. It's easier if I just order them, but yeah, fine. It depends how the private midwife works, because part of our ability to work privately is to have a collaborative agreement with a obstetric provider, which could be a hospital, a health service, or an obstetrician. So some midwives do require referrals to see them in order to claim the Medicare rebates, but it doesn't really matter if you know that or not. Just get in contact with your midwife and then they'll direct you to who can provide a referral if you need it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
How do you choose a midwife? As Cath said, just get in quick, find one. That's probably number one. If you are already quite aware of what your ideal birth looks like, then that might help guide you in finding a private midwife whose focus aligns with your ideal birth. For the majority of them, as a private midwife, the ones that I've met anyway, they're very focused on the woman. So whatever the woman needs to achieve the outcome that she wants is the best way to support her. So there's not a lot of private midwives I know who like will only do home birth, or only do hospital birth. Most of them will like work across the spectrum. You might be planning a hospital birth but wanting your own private midwife for that anyway. Asking if the midwife has admitting rights or how they work in that system is a really good thing to consider if you find yourself in that situation. And then you might have already had a baby and had a really tough time with breastfeeding. So you might want to find a private midwife who has extensive breastfeeding knowledge or is also a lactation consultant. So there's a couple of things to consider. Although, number one, just find a private midwife. Just figure the rest out. Might also be appropriate. Often a private midwife will offer a free visit or a phone call at the start of a pregnancy to discuss their services with you. This is usually like a bulk billed appointment. This is where they can answer all the questions that you have, or just to meet them and see if you actually gel with them in person before you commit to one midwife. You need to be confident with your choice, but you also need to remember that just as same goes for any health professional, you're not bound to staying with them if they can no longer provide the care that you need. And this is the same for obstetricians or hospitals or clinics or, GPs. Same across the spectrum, I guess. So there's no contract that you're signing before you ever meet a private midwife. So there shouldn't be much stress about that. Would you say anything else?
Yeah, I'm just, I would meet a couple if you have if you're lucky enough to live somewhere where there's a few, and feel them out and ask lots of questions and sit with it and then decide.
Cool. And I suppose that would work really well, especially if you're planning on getting pregnant and you know that, okay, hopefully in the next few months I'm going to need a private midwife. And then you've got a bit of time to get organised and, do your research. All right, when do you contact? So I feel like we've probably covered this. If you've decided you want a private midwife for your pregnancy care or your home birth, you just get in touch with the one service in your area as soon as you can. You might have to apply to a few to find one with availability because they do book out quite quickly. They have limits on how many births a month they tend to book in, just in terms of looking after themselves and making sure they have enough time to spend with each woman. But as Cath said, a great idea to meet a few if you've got the time before you get pregnant, or as soon as you find out, so that you can find the one that's going to be your midwife. What to expect with the first visit? So it will often be a couple of hours. I know in hospitals, traditionally, I'm used to spending maybe an hour. I felt really lucky if I could get an hour. When I was working in a midwifery group practice, I was often spending an hour and a half. But now I'm back working in this city, I've got 40 minutes. So having a couple of hours to spend with your midwife for that first visit is really fantastic. She'll ask you questions about your medical history, your family history, if you've had any babies before, you have to go through that. She'll answer all your questions. A private midwife will do a physical check as well, so do your blood pressure, check all of your bloods and your scans, and make sure you're feeling comfortable and you kind of know what to expect for your appointments. It's usually a pretty relaxed visit at your house, and can often involve other family members as well, which is really nice. Is there anything else you would do on a first visit, Cath?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah. Oh, I guess we'll talk about their expectations and my expectations and what the care will look like. And also talk a little bit about insurance and the Australian College of Midwife guidelines, which direct how I can practice as a midwife and when I would need to involve other health professionals. So what might pop up in their experience.
Cool, that's really good. Does a private midwife have any say in who their clients are? Absolutely. It's an agreement between two people. So not only does the pregnant mum and the family have to agree to that midwife, the midwife also has to agree to take the pregnant person on. The most birthing clients a private midwife will usually take on is about 4 a month, or like 4 due dates per calendar month. Midwives tend to book their holidays at least 9 months in advance, and will often have at least 1 month off a year. Coming from a similar service in a hospital, we kind of talk about we take 40 women a year, which works out to about 4 birthing women a month for 10 months. And then you've got some time off kind of built into that, which works quite well. Some midwives have specialty areas: hospital birth, home birth, postnatal care, breastfeeding, and might consider your medical birth history to see if you align with what they can offer as well. Is there anything that you would add for that, Cath?
No.
All right, what does pregnancy care with a private midwife look like? So they often follow a similar program of pregnancy visits as to other care providers, but keep in mind that private midwives can tailor their care to how you need it. So the base or the foundation of care is usually 1 visit a month until about 28 weeks, then every couple of weeks until 37 weeks, and then every week to your baby. Postnatally, so once you've had baby, it can be every day for the first few days if needed, and then 7 days, 10 days, 2 weeks, and then every week or 2 until baby is 6 weeks old. This can be very different for each private midwife, and it really depends how your pregnancy is going. You know, once you've had baby, how your postpartum period's going, if breastfeeding's easy, you know, all the kind of additional support that you can get.
I think the 6 weeks of postnatal care is really special, and you don't find that in many other, or any other, I might even say, models. Yeah, it's a really good support.
Yeah. Where I recently started working in Perth, we do up to 6 weeks of postnatal, but it's like you come into the clinic and we see you at 2 weeks, and then we see you at 6 weeks. Which, I mean, is better than most other models around. And people can get extra visits in between that if needed. But again, it's in a clinic, it's not in your own house. You know, that person's got to fit in with our calendars and our availability. So there's definitely some really good benefits to having a private midwife for those first 6 weeks. All right, what does birthing with a private midwife look like? So generally speaking, a private midwife is considered on call for you from about 37 weeks if they're going to be your primary care provider during birth. When you start seeing signs of labour, let them know, keep them updated. They'll let you know when it's time for them to come over or head to the hospital. A private midwife might come visit you in early labour to make sure you're going well, reassure you, listen to baby, make sure you're in good spirits heading into your labour. But then they'll often head home to have a bit of a rest until labour is really well established. And then they support you through your birth until baby is born and a few hours old. How do you know if it's safe to birth at home or have a private midwife? So Cass already touched on this. The Australian College of Midwives developed guidelines ensuring that safe and appropriate care and referrals are provided for pregnant women. It's called the National Midwifery Guidelines for Consultation and Referral. A referral to another health professional in your pregnancy doesn't mean that a primary midwife can't be your lead care provider anymore. It just means that another opinion has to be involved. Like for example, you could have somebody who's ended up with abnormal thyroid function in their pregnancy. As a midwife, that's not my specialty. You'd be looking at referring to an obstetrician or to an endocrinologist just for a review and a plan for what we do about thyroid function in pregnancy. There's heaps and heaps of research, and we're talking recent Australian research, so very good quality, that demonstrates that birthing at home with a non-health professional, which is usually a private midwife, is just as safe as birthing in hospital and often leads to better outcomes. One of the really big questions that I hear when I am in conversations about home birth and private midwives is, oh, but what if something happens? What if there's an emergency? Well, guess what? All midwives are trained to deal with emergency situations, whether that is in a hospital, at a home, your baby's born in a car park, at the front of the hospital. We can do it all. I once helped some parents birth their baby over the phone because they were stuck on the side of the road in our hospital in confused. Like we can do with birth and tricky situations in any location. There are a couple of times I've seen or talked to private midwives who had, you know, a baby who needed some extra help, like starting to breathe initially, or mum sat bled more than like you kind of want them to, and their responses and their outcomes from that have always been absolutely, like, you know, perfect outcomes, really quick response, really quick recognition of things that aren't going well, and acting on that quite quickly. And it's really good to be aware of that when you're, say, having a home birth. It's not just one midwife at your birth, there's always at least two. So one midwife focuses on the mum and one focuses on the baby. So you've always got two trained health professionals at each birth as well. Cath, have you had any emergency situations you've had to deal with at home?
Thankfully, nothing crazy. But yeah, I think you've said it, that all of our research, and this is years and years and years of, or decades of research, and now, as you said, Australian research is showing that well, those emergencies are less likely to happen at home, for one, but two, the outcomes from these emergencies are the same, whether it's home or hospital, yet there are less interventions in the home space. So yeah, to me, that means it's actually safer for a lot of women to birth at home if they feel safe to do so.
Yes.
And if they have a care provider who is well linked into emergency support. But yeah, we've dealt with standard, very basic emergencies. When I say basic, the ones that are quite routine that we're used to dealing with in a hospital, like baby needing a little bit of oxygen, you know, mum having a bit of an extra amount of blood loss, those sorts of things. But it's always our priority to transfer into hospital before an emergency occurs. So we're always making sure that everything is within a normal range.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Very cool.
And sorry, this is going to go on for ages, but I just thought the other thing that strikes me with the recent research is that even planning, we're not talking about home birth, are we? I was going to say even planning a home birth with a private midwife decreases your rate of complications and interventions, whether doesn't matter where you end up birthing. Does that make sense in the end?
Yeah. I think, is that because that person's doing their research and is like aware of what their choices would be in different situations, do you think?
I think that's definitely one aspect. I think the other I mean, there'd be so many parts to that, but I think having a carer that you trust and that knows you, just that's the benefits of continuity of care and midwifery-led care. And then I think just maybe the state of health and wellness and inner knowing and that women have when they take responsibility for their births as well.
Yeah.
But that's, more research to be done. Why does even just planning to birth at home lead to better?
That's really cool. I wasn't aware of that. That's awesome. All right, Cath, what's in a private midwife's home visiting bag? Talk us through it.
So you've got a list there, which is great. So in the back there's the birth pool. So most women who choose to birth at home will use a pool at some point. as well as the shower. I have all the emergency equipment, so resuscitation equipment for both mum and baby, and an oxygen tank. I have fluids and things to put in an IV line. I have all the drugs that we use in hospital to manage any bleeding, postpartum pain. I have suturing equipment if you need to give the mum some stitches in the end. Hardly any of this I use, by the way. I just have to carry it. Gloves, lots of waterproofing and absorbent towels and pads, equipment to take blood, equipment to monitor mum, baby scales. I always forget the baby scales actually, but luckily I'm seeing them again that day or the next morning, so I bring them then. Paperwork, yeah, sounds about it. Oh, and then I take things like, and you've popped down the bottom, homeopathics and essential oils and some really, really lovely herbal remedies for labour and after labour as well.
Awesome. I think I said this to you a few weeks ago, but I feel like we need like a whole nother session just on that, because working in the hospital system for me for most of my career, you do not see homeopathics. How much does it cost? So it varies greatly, but in the research I was doing for this, I would consider that between $4,000 and $6,000 is pretty average for a home birth package. But keep in mind that every private midwife will have different packages and they can be tailored to your specific requirements. And there are also rebates given by Medicare that you can claim if you're an Australian citizen. And every private midwife also has payment plans. I think for you, Cath, like your home birth kind of package with like full complement of care from, as soon as someone finds out they're pregnant, 3 to 6 weeks post-birth is just over $5,000. And when you consider or compare that to like a private obstetrician, you're paying about $7,000, and that's not including the birth stuff. And that's with private health insurance. So I feel like you're a pretty good bargain. How would you, because you've got a few different packages as well, I think, don't you?
So yeah, my total package is $5,050. And I do break it up into pregnancy care, labour and birth care, and the postpartum care. Yeah.
Easy. All right, so I've put in a couple of fun little situations that Cath's going to walk us through in terms of how she she would just approach this, just so we can get a bit of an idea of how a private midwife might work. So our first situation is I'm 39 weeks pregnant. It's my first baby, and I think my waters just broke and I'm at home. My waters are clear, my baby's been moving really normally today, and I think I've been feeling cramps for the last few hours, but I've been trying to ignore them. I'm hoping for a home birth. I call my private midwife, who just happens to be Cath. What happens next?
Great. So yay, Holly, this is so exciting. Your baby's coming soon. So hopefully we would have had a visit in the last week or so. So we're sure that baby's head down and everything is healthy and normal up until this point. So I'd have a few questions with how you're coping. Has baby had been moving today, but has baby been moving since the waters have broken? And if you're unsure, I'd probably pop in for a quick visit. If you were very happy that baby was well and that the waters were clear, we would just leave it. And if it was nighttime, I'd say have some rest. If it was daytime, I'd say
sounds awesome.
let's get moving, stay hydrated, eat, move, good hygiene, because now that barrier is gone between the bacteria in the vagina and baby's living space. Anything? Is that what you meant? Is that what?
Yeah.
Yeah. have a chat. I might pop in, I might not, depending on how she was doing.
Perfect. Okay, so everything's going well. I'm labouring at home. I'm feeling really good. My partner's set up a birth pool. I've really enjoyed being in the shower, but now I'm feeling like I want to be in the water. Cath is on the way. I feel like my baby's close. What happens when you arrive to someone's house and you can tell they're in good labour? What's the first thing you would do?
I usually just observe for a little while. You know, if they're in their birthing zone, I'll just quietly, usually the lights are down, I'll quietly bring my equipment in and get set up for the birth. And once I've been observing for a little while, I'll start to do some obs on mum. So I'll have a listen to baby, I'll check her blood pressure. Depending on where she's at, I might even have a feel of her belly and make sure that baby's still in a good position.
Awesome.
Yeah, just very quietly in the background, let her do her thing.
Great. Okay, and then say everything progresses really well. I'm in the bath. I feel like I have to push, and I'm about to have a baby. What, what's something that you know that you're doing about that, or like how are you preparing for that moment?
Me as midwife, what am I doing? I'll make sure that my second midwife is there or on their way, and nothing really. Yeah, when everything's progressing beautifully, I'm just watching closely from a little distance, letting her do her thing. Of course, I'm listening in to baby regularly, but there's not a lot. If she's got it, she's got it. There might be a little bit of encouragement, like, yep, that's great. Keep breathing.
Cool. And I guess as well, if someone's planned like a water birth at home, you've already had some really good conversations with them and the partner, like about what that looks like and what to expect. You know, like, because everyone presumes babies come out and just like scream the house down. But what I found with water births is that babies will often come out and just very gently transition to this new world. And so they don't often scream straight away. You take that little extra minute to kind of change colour. Everyone's really surprised because brand new babies are born like this weird purpley blue colour. And that's their normal colour. And then once they hit that really rich oxygen air that we breathe out here, then they start to change to pink. But I mean, if you're having a water birth at home, then it's definitely something you would have kind of gone through anyway, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Exactly. We've done a lot of preparation and talk leading up to birth, so there's not a lot of talking in birth.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, a bit of a plot twist now. At some point, whether it's like when Cath arrives to my house and listens to baby first, or maybe later in the labour, she listens to my baby. She's a little bit concerned. Maybe baby's not covering quite as well after a contraction as she would expect him to. And then she does my blood pressure and she notices that's on the higher side of what my normal is. And she decides that we need to have a little discussion about what transfer hospital looks like. What would you do in this situation?
Yeah, so depending on how concerning it was, if it was just a slight variation, that would be very different to if it was significantly concerning. So as I said, we're always trying to transfer before an emergency. So this is definitely a discussion with mum and dad and support people about what to do next and what our options are. We could call an ambulance if birth was close and I thought I might need some extra hands. Then we would call an ambulance to the house. If it seemed like it wasn't too time sensitive and we could just make our way into hospital, we just get into the car and head into the hospital. Yeah.
Cool, great. What happens when you arrive at a hospital? I mean, obviously every hospital is going to be different. But for you, if you're doing a hospital transfer for somebody who's in labour, what happens when you guys get to hospital?
So what I also do is I call ahead so that they know to expect us. And they've had a little bit of a handover, so we don't just rock up and they don't know what's happening. So we get into the hospital, and I do have admitting rights like you talked about earlier. So I stay with the mum and partner and continue to clinically care for them. So when we arrive, we go straight into a labour ward, into the labour room. And depending on, again, the acuity of the concern or the situation, there might already be the doctor that I've let know that has arrived, or we'll then call in a doctor to come. Yeah.
Cool.
So there'll often be another midwife, if they're not too busy, who'll come in and give me a hand as well, which is really helpful when you have one or two midwives there who can help pop a monitor on or help collect some paperwork. I use the paperwork that the hospital uses, so it's all very seamless, that transition from home into hospital.
Yeah, that would really help for sure. And then I guess, like, you're just providing the clinical care that person needs. Like, it could be the same clinical care that they would be getting at their home birth. It's just now in a different setting. But then you also have, I guess, more resources behind you if anything does significantly change. Great. Awesome. All right. Now, I've had a couple of people pop in and out of today's call. But Eric, you're the last one standing. Do you have any questions for us?
I should have made notes. There were some questions. One of them was around, I know you're saying you work with another midwife, but then there's two present at the birth. So does that mean, like, if the other midwife needs to replace you, she would have a second midwife that she works with?
Great question. So the second midwife that attends a birth doesn't have to be a private midwife. It can be any midwife that has, well, any midwife that is competent with her, with their neonatal resuscitation and obstetric emergencies. So we actually are very fortunate here in Geraldton to have about 5 other midwives who still work in the hospital system who come and support us and be our second midwives at births.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd have them lined up beforehand, but the person would not necessarily have met them, or?
Yeah, it depends on the woman, and sometimes we'll get her to meet 1 or 2 of the others. Or she might, because it's a small town, sometimes you know them already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have that discussion during the pregnancy. Who would you like as the second midwife? And if that wasn't possible, who would you like as backup? Yeah.
Trying to think what they would.
I would imagine that it wouldn't be common, but every now and then both you and the other private midwife would also be busy at births for each of you, if 2 people are birthing in town at the same time. So it's always good to have that, like, extra cohort of supportive midwives to call on.
Yeah, it wouldn't be possible without the other midwives.
So I actually am training as a doula at the moment. So I guess that would be another question, is I've seen some people that have said they find benefit in having a doula as well as private midwives, others that say they didn't feel it was necessary. I'd just be interested on your experience and your feelings on that.
I love doulas. I just think doulas make everything wonderful.
Good start.
As Holly said, in early labour we'll probably leave the couple. So it's really nice for them, if they need that extra support, to have a doula, or at least a birth team. Yeah, I think they're wonderful. It's so helpful to have them at a birth because we're busy with the clinical care sometimes. And it's really nice to have someone else to, hold mum's hand, to make cups of tea, to towel her off when she gets in and out of the pool. It's just really helpful. Yeah. So I think if a mum can afford a doula and a private midwife, then go for it.
Yeah. I've got a girlfriend who has just become a private midwife, but she also has worked in the hospital system for a long time. And when I spoke to her about it, she did say that she finds when there's a doula present in the hospital setting, she feels that she's very much reduced to clinical, like just to that clinical role, and she loves that, the supportive side of it. And I guess in WA we're lucky enough to midwife 1-to-1, whereas obviously I'm training with an organisation in Sydney where they don't midwife 1-to-1 in the hospitals. And yeah, so she just, one, I think she's had a couple of bad experiences with doulas, but two, she finds that having someone to support the mum kind of takes away from some of her role.
I don't think we have too much support if it's the right.
I mean, it's just nice to get different perspectives.
Yeah, I think also I'm very fortunate in that I know the doulas here.
Yeah.
And so we already have a great relationship. I can see that if I was working in the hospital and I had a doula who I didn't know, there was no relationship, there could potentially be challenging moments, but it's different.
Yeah, I think she had I think she said one doula locked herself and the client in the bathroom and delivered the baby.
Yeah, okay.
I was like, I can understand that would be concerning.
We all have to be on the same team, we all have to be together. Yeah. And, the labouring woman is so sensitive and open to conflict and to issues in the space. So it has to be a cohesive and supportive environment for her to labour beautifully.
Yeah, for sure. I have the opposite experience. I actually, as a midwife, really love having doulas there because I feel like I'm always so torn, between I'm trying to do all this paperwork out, and then, someone from my neighbouring birth suite comes and asks for a hand, and I'm like, I just want to be here supporting this person. And so knowing that there's a doula there who's actually stepped into that role means that I can support her as much as I'm able to. But if I'm also needing to support a junior midwife or, do paperwork and things like that, it makes my life a lot easier. But I've also had quite consistently good experiences with doulas as well, which probably has made a difference. And it was really funny. So last month I did a couple of sessions with a doula, doing one of these webinars. And so that's up on my YouTube as well. And she's talked about conflict between doulas and other health professionals, and that was quite a good insight, I thought, as well.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll go and have a look at that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cath. This has been fantastic. It's been really good to get a bit of an insight into how private midwifery works. Next month we are looking at GP obstetricians, and I've got a really nice one that I work with lined up. So it'll be really good to have a little look at birth from their perspective, which I think it will be quite different. But I really hope that out of this, some people consider private midwifery care a little bit more, or at least understand it as something that can be beautifully supportive towards the birth that they're aiming for, which will be fantastic. If, the general Australian population just understood that birth isn't scary, and then the midwives are that model of care is the way to do it. Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Cool. All right. Well, have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
No worries. Good luck with your doula training. That sounds
Thanks.
fantastic.
Getting there.
And hopefully I'll see you around the birth spaces.
Hopefully.
Bye.
Thanks. See you.